The man who called himself Johnstown of Elmgrove wasn't the kind of place that made the news. It had one gas station, a hardware store that closed early on Sundays, and a main street where people waved whether they knew you or not. Everybody had a story, but most of them sounded the same: born here, raised here, stayed here. The world didn't come to Elmgrove. People left it to find something bigger. So when a quiet man named John Hale moved into the little white cottage on Maple Lane, no one asked many questions. The house had been empty since old Mr. Peterson passed, and folks were just glad someone was keeping it from falling apart. John was polite, paid in cash, drove a dusty pickup truck, and said little more than morning and thank you. He wore old boots, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He bought groceries at Lena's market, always helped carry bags for older folks, and took long walks through the hills at sunset. But what nobody knew, not Sheriff Tom, not Lena, not the mailman, not even the chatty waitress at Betty's diner, was that John Hale wasn't really John Hale. He was Keanu Reeves. And he didn't want anyone to know. He had come to Elmgrove under a different name because he needed something the city couldn't give him: any more silence, simplicity, and a place where people saw a man, not a movie. It started one summer evening when he showed up at Lena's market during closing. Lena was tired, dragging crates back into the store, when he stepped forward without a word and lifted two of them for her. "Thanks," she said, brushing her hair back. "New in town, sort of," he answered. "You got family here?" He shook his head. "Just needed a change." She eyed him. "You a writer or something?" He smiled slightly. "Something like that." And that was the end of it. No further questions. For 2 months, John Hale lived quietly in Elmgrove. He painted the cottage himself, helped fix the broken swings at the park, and attended Sunday service, even though he sat in the back and slipped out before the final hymn. Kids liked him. He'd always kneel when talking to them, never talked down. He taught one boy how to ride a bike without training wheels. He helped another repair a rusted skateboard with parts from the junkyard. But he never talked about where he came from. One afternoon, something changed. A storm had rolled in overnight, and an old oak tree had fallen across Lena's roof. Keanu, still known as John, was there before sunrise with a chainsaw and a ladder. "How'd you know?" Lena asked, stepping onto the porch in a robe. "Heard it snap," he said. "Figured someone might need help." By noon, the tree was gone. By sunset, the hole in the roof was patched. People started talking. "He's strong for someone who doesn't say much. He fixed the shelter's water line last week. Didn't even ask for anything. My kid said he saw him buy groceries for that single mom down by the train tracks. John Hale, he's different." But still, no one asked more. Until the fair, every autumn. Elmgrove held a harvest fair on the school grounds: bake-offs, pie-eating contests, music, dancing. This year, the town needed someone to help build the stage after the carpenter broke his leg. John volunteered. He worked with a local teen named Mason, who was usually in trouble. Broken windows, skipped classes, angry outbursts. But with John, Mason listened. "You ever build stuff before?" Mason asked. "A little," Keanu said. "You're kinda weird, man," Mason said. "But not in a bad way." Keanu laughed. "I'll take it." By the end of the weekend, the stage was up, and Mason had stayed out of trouble for 3 whole days. His mother cried when she heard. That night, the mayor asked John to stand with the town committee for a photo. He hesitated. "Come on." The mayor said, "You're the man of the hour." John stepped forward, pulled his cap low, and stood quietly as the photo was taken. But the next morning, everything changed. Someone had posted the photo online. It wasn't a big deal, just the fair's Facebook page. But one sharp-eyed woman from 3 counties over messaged the admin, "Is that who I think it is?" The photo went viral overnight. At Lena's market, phones buzzed non-stop. At Betty's diner, customers compared images. "You see the eyes, it's him, I swear." By the time Keanu walked into town to buy coffee the next morning, everyone was staring. He knew. He felt it before anyone said a word. He set down the coffee mug and said, "I should explain." But before he could, Lena stood from behind the counter. No need, she said. The diner went silent. You helped my daughter get to the hospital when she had that allergy attack, Lena said. You didn't ask for anything, you just drove. Keanu nodded. The sheriff stepped forward. You fixed the school's furnace in the middle of the night. Mrs. Connors from the post office spoke next. You watched my dog while I was at my sister's funeral. Everyone had a story, but no one had known who he really was until now, and not one person judged him. Not one asked for selfies. Not one treated him differently. You're still John Hale to us, Lena said. Keanu blinked, stunned. Why? An old man in the back spoke up. Because what you did mattered more than what you were hiding. And with that, everyone went back to eating. The coffee was poured again, and Keanu sat down. Still John, but not invisible anymore. He had come to disappear, but what he found instead was something even more rare. A place that didn't care who he was, only who he chose to be. The town that kept his secret after the truth came out. Keanu expected the town to change. He thought the silence would be replaced with questions. He thought people would line up outside his door, asking for autographs, photos, maybe even money. But the next morning, Lena still charged him for eggs. The sheriff still waved and didn't stop to chat. The only difference was the quiet smile Mason gave him when they passed in the street. Keanu had lived in worlds where his name opened doors, where people leaned in, not because they cared, but because they wanted something. This was different. You good? Lena asked as she rang up his groceries that afternoon. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just surprised. What? That we're not chasing you down with cameras, a little, he said, smiling. Lena shrugged. You fixed my roof. You fixed the school stage. You helped Mason. You're one of us now. Doesn't matter what the rest of the world calls you. That night, Keanu sat on his porch watching the stars. The town was quiet. A dog barked in the distance. The wind rustled the trees, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a visitor. The next morning brought something new. A letter. No stamp. Just tucked into the screen door. Mr. Hale, you helped my son. He's smiling again. He hasn't smiled in a long time. I don't care what your real name is. Thank you, Mason's mom. Keanu folded the note slowly, placing it in the book he was reading. At Betty's diner, Mason slid into the booth across from him. You still gonna stay? The teen asked. I was thinking about it. Good, Mason muttered. You're the only one who listens. They ate in silence. That week, Mason asked if he could help around the cottage, fix some gutters, repaint the fence. Keanu agreed, not because he needed help but because Mason did. During one of their breaks, Mason asked the question Keanu had been waiting for. Why'd you come here, really? Keanu leaned against the railing, the paintbrush in his hand dripping slowly. I needed to remember who I was, away from the noise, the cameras, the expectations. Did you forget? Mason asked. Yeah, Keanu said quietly. I forgot how to just be a person. Mason nodded like he understood. People forget I'm a person too. They just see the trouble. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. One Saturday morning, Lena called him in a panic. Our teacher for the art class didn't show. We've got 15 kids in the community hall waiting with paper and no one to guide them. Can you help? Keanu hesitated. Double quotes me. You helped Mason build a birdhouse. You'll figure it out. So he went. When he walked into the hall, the kids looked up. Some recognized him, others didn't. He knelt by the craft table and said, Today we're going to draw something we love. Not someone, not a thing, just a feeling. Something that makes you feel safe. The room filled with the sound of crayons, markers, brushes. One little girl drew a blanket with stars on it. One boy drew his grandfather's laugh as musical notes. Another painted the diner's booths and the smell of pancakes. When class ended, a teacher approached Keanu. You ever consider doing this full-time? He laughed. I'm not exactly trained. You didn't need training to get a kid to draw what hope feels like. Later that week, the mayor asked him to speak at the town's youth gathering. Me, Keanu asked again. John, the mayor, said, deliberately using his chosen name. These kids trust you. They listen. They don't care what you've acted in. They care about how you've acted here. Keanu stood in the community hall that Friday night, looking at a room filled with young faces. He took a deep breath. "You all know me now," he began. "Or at least, you know more than you did." He paused. "But the most important thing you can know about anyone is what they choose to do when no one's watching." He looked at Mason, sitting quietly in the back. "I came here to disappear, but instead, I found something better. I found people who saw me, not my name, not my past, not the headlines, just me." He stepped down. No applause, just silence, the kind that comes from real listening. As he walked home, Mason caught up to him. "You're not gonna leave, are you?" Keanu looked up at the stars. "Not if you still need me." "I don't," Mason said, "but maybe someone else does." Keanu stopped walking. That's when he knew this place wasn't where he came to hide. It was where he came to begin again. The girl who stopped speaking. Summer was slowly ending in Elmgrove. The leaves hadn't changed yet, but the mornings were cooler, and the light seemed to stretch a little longer in the evenings, as if the sun itself didn't want to say goodbye. Keanu still John Hale to most had settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, a visit to Lena's store, or a quiet walk through the woods behind his cottage. Afternoons were spent helping neighbors or working with Mason on odd jobs. Evenings, he read or repaired things, often without being asked. But then came the girl. Her name was April. She was 9 years old, and she hadn't spoken a word in nearly a year. Her mother, Cassie, was new to Elmgrove. They'd moved into the edge of town, into a small yellow house with peeling shutters and a broken gate. Cassie worked at the flower shop. April stayed home, always quiet, always looking out the window, but never coming outside. People whispered that April had witnessed something terrible in the city, something that made her stop talking. No one knew what. No one pressed. Then one morning, Lena called Keanu. "Cassie's daughter won't come to the community center," she said. "The other kids think she's strange." Keanu didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll stop by." He walked to their house that afternoon with a box of old paintbrushes, string, and popsicle sticks. April was on the porch, knees tucked to her chest, staring at the garden like it might bloom if she watched it long enough. He sat on the steps near her but didn't speak. Instead, he opened the box and started building something out of the sticks. A tiny bridge. She watched. He kept building. After 10 minutes, he handed it to her. She didn't take it. He placed it beside her. "No words needed," he said, softly. "Just thoughts." He left without another word. The next day, he returned. This time, April was waiting with the bridge in her hands. She sat beside him. Again, silence. He pulled out 2 pieces of twine and started knotting them slowly. She watched. Curious. He made a bracelet and left it on the porch rail. On the 3rd day, she held out her wrist. He smiled and helped her tie it on. On the 4th day, she brought out a folded piece of paper. It was a sketch, him sitting on the porch, holding the bridge. Keanu unfolded it slowly. His eyes softened. "You're an artist," he said gently. She blinked but said nothing. That night, Cassie showed up at Keanu's door. "I don't know what you're doing," she said, "but April's sleeping through the night now. She even smiled yesterday. She hasn't done that in so long." Keanu shook his head. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just showing up." Cassie looked down. "Thank you. Don't thank me," he said. "Thank her for letting me in." The next week, April followed him to the community center. The other kids stared. Some whispered. Mason noticed first. He stepped forward, blocking the others. "She's cool," he said. "She's with John." That was enough. Keanu set up an art table and let April take the lead. The kids watched her draw quietly, carefully, full of feeling. By the end of the afternoon, she had a small group of kids drawing beside her, copying her style, asking her what came next. She didn't speak, but she smiled, and that was louder than any words. 2 days later, something happened. Keanu was helping Mason fix the garden hose outside the center when April ran up. Breathless, "Come," she whispered. Keanu froze. He looked at Mason. Mason looked just as stunned. "She talked," Mason said under his breath. Keanu followed her. Heart THUDDING. Inside the center, one of the younger kids had fallen and scraped his knee. April was kneeling beside him, patting his back gently. "You're okay," she whispered to the boy. "You're okay." Keanu stayed at the doorway, eyes filled with quiet pride. April looked up and saw him. She smiled. She didn't need to speak again. She had already said enough. Later that evening, Keanu sat at home, the bracelet April had made now on his wrist. He looked at it and thought about all the times people had tried to heal him with words, with advice, with noise. But sometimes healing wasn't loud. It was patient. It was silent. It was choosing to show up again and again, just like April had, just like he had. And maybe, he thought, that was enough. The fire on Walnut Hill. It started with a crackle, a branch snapping in the distance, maybe a spark. No one saw it at first. No one expected danger in a town as quiet as Elm Grove. But by sunset, smoke curled over the ridge behind Walnut Hill. By nightfall, the fire was visible from Main Street, flames licking at treetops, orange reflected in shop windows, sirens wailed. Families rushed to gather pets and photos and what little they could carry. Keanu was at the community center, helping the kids organize their drawings for a weekend showcase. When Mason burst in, "It's spreading fast," he said. "The fire department's out there, but they're asking for volunteers." Keanu didn't hesitate. He stood up, looked at the kids, and said calmly, "You're safe here. Stay with Miss Lena. Mason, let's go." They ran toward Walnut Hill. The town had never seen a fire like this. Wind pushed the flames downhill. The firefighters, young, under-resourced, did what they could. But panic had already started. Homes near the forest edge were in danger. Animals were fleeing. Smoke stung every breath. Keanu didn't stop to think. He jumped in where needed, carrying water lines, guiding elderly neighbors to safety, helping lift a fallen tree off the road so emergency vehicles could pass. "Who is that guy?" one of the firemen asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "He just showed up," someone replied. They didn't know him, but they followed him. He stayed calm when others yelled. He moved fast when others froze. And when a frightened child screamed for his dog still trapped in the backyard, Keanu went back for it, ignoring the smoke, scaling the fence, emerging minutes later with the small terrier in his arms. When he handed the dog to the boy, no one could speak. They didn't need to. Around midnight, the fire jumped a ditch and threatened the home of Mrs. Connors, the post office widow who lived alone. She hadn't evacuated. She was still inside, unaware, her hearing too weak to catch the warnings. "I'll go," Keanu said. "It's too dangerous," one firefighter said. "Flames are already near the back porch." "Then we don't wait," Keanu replied. He didn't ask for permission. He just ran. The house was filled with smoke when he entered. He wrapped a wet towel around his face, called out Mrs. Connors' name, and found her in the kitchen, trying to pack her late husband's medals into a showbox. "You need to come now," he said gently. "I can't leave his things. We'll come back for them," he promised. He carried her out, shielding her with his jacket, one arm around her frail body. Fire lit the sky behind them. Ash rained down like angry snow. But they made it out. And still Keanu stayed. Hour after hour. He helped, without a title, without armor, just with steady hands and unshakable focus. By dawn, the fire was under control. The firefighters were exhausted. The townspeople, safe but shaken, stood in clusters, watching the hills smolder. Keanu sat on the curb, arms black with soot, eyes red from smoke. Mason handed him a bottle of water. "You saved lives tonight," the teen said. "So did you," Keanu replied. "They're gonna write about this." "You know," Mason said. Keanu shook his head. "Doesn't matter if they do." "Why not?" He looked at the sunrise over the burned ridge. "Because real kindness doesn't need headlines." Behind him, Mrs. Connors approached slowly. Her showbox was in her arms, rescued by another volunteer. She placed her hand on Keanu's shoulder. "You're more than a movie star," she whispered. "You're the man who ran into fire for a stranger." He looked up at her, eyes tired. "You're not strangers anymore," he said. By the next afternoon, word had spread. Not through newspapers, not through the internet, but through whispers. Keanu had saved a woman, a dog, 3 homes, and one terrified teenager who'd lost his footing and nearly fell into a ditch. And still he asked for nothing. He returned to his cottage, washed his clothes, hung them on the line, then returned to the community center like nothing had happened. The kids were waiting. April handed him a new drawing. This one showed a man with ash on his face, holding a child's hand in front of a burning tree. Keanu looked at it for a long time. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded. "You're brave." He smiled. "I was scared too." "Really?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "But courage doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing anyway." April folded the drawing and handed it to him. Then, "You're the bravest person I know." And for once, Keanu had no words. Just gratitude. Deep and quiet, like the town he had come to call home. The reporter from the city. 3 weeks after the fire, the hills still smelled like smoke. Blackened trees stood like charred bones, but life had already begun to return. Birds chirped again. Wildflowers pushed through ash, and in the town of Elmgrove, people smiled with just a little more warmth when they passed each other on the street. But peace doesn't stay hidden for long. One crisp morning, a silver car with city plates rolled into town. Out stepped a woman in heels, sunglasses, and a sleek gray coat. She walked with purpose, straight to Lena's market. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm looking for a man named John Hale." Lena hesitated. "Why, I'm a reporter," she said. "My name's Claire Foster. I think you know him by another name." Lena didn't blink. "We know him as a friend, and we don't give friends to strangers." Claire smiled politely. "I'm not here to hurt him. I just want to talk." But the door closed before she finished her sentence. The reporter went to Betty's diner next. No luck. Then the fire station. Still nothing. Word traveled fast in Elmgrove. By noon, everyone knew. Someone from the outside was here asking questions. Keanu heard about it from Mason. "She's poking around," the boy said. "Says she's from a magazine or something." Keanu nodded. "Thanks." He didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he walked to the bench in front of the town library and sat down, waiting. 10 minutes later, Claire found him. "You're a hard man to track down," she said, pulling off her sunglasses. "That's the idea," Keanu replied calmly. She sat beside him. "You've disappeared from Hollywood. No interviews, no red carpets, no films. And then, this town, this fire, this story." He stayed silent. "People need to hear this," she said. "They need to know who you are." Keanu turned to her. "They already do, the people who matter. But think of the impact." "No," he said gently but firmly. "Impact doesn't always need a spotlight. Sometimes it needs silence." She looked at him, confused. "Then why not at least explain why you came here?" He looked down the street at Lena sweeping her porch, at Mason kicking a ball with the younger kids, at April drawing chalk flowers on the sidewalk. "Because I needed to remember what it means to live without being watched." Claire exhaled. "So you're not giving me the story." "I'm living it," he said, "and it's not for sale." For a moment, she was quiet. Then she stood, brushed off her coat, and reached into her pocket. "This is my card," she said. "If you ever change your mind." He didn't take it. Instead, he looked her in the eyes and said, "Just promise me something." "What's that?" "Tell a different story. Not about fame, not about fire. Tell one about a boy who stopped fighting, about a girl who found her voice again, about a town that didn't care who someone used to be." She stared at him, then slowly nodded. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "No one ever is," he replied. That evening, the silver car rolled out of Elmgrove and didn't return. But 2 weeks later, a small article appeared online. Not on the front page, not under Keanu's name. Just a quiet story buried in a column titled "Good People." It spoke of a man named John Hale who helped rebuild a community center, who taught children how to paint hope, who saved a woman and a dog, who listened more than he talked. There was no photo, no credits. Just a final line. "Sometimes the kindest souls are the ones who choose to remain unknown." The town read it and smiled. Keanu read it and folded the page into a book. April read it aloud in front of the class, her voice clear, steady, proud. And Mason, he clipped it and pinned it on the community board next to the drawings. One night, Keanu sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames. Lena knocked on his door. "I brought dinner," she said, holding a casserole dish. "You keep forgetting to eat." He smiled. "Thanks." As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know, John, even if the world never finds out what you've done here, we will, and that's enough." He nodded slowly. "It is, and for the first time." He meant it. The bench with his name on I taught him finally came to Elmgrove. The trees turned gold and red, and the smell of apples and burning wood filled the air. Sweaters came out. Pumpkin pies lined the diner shelves. Children raked leaves into piles only to jump in them again. Everything slowed, softened. Life had found its rhythm again, and so had Keanu. He was no longer just the quiet man who lived in the cottage by the woods. He was a helper, a friend, a teacher, someone the kids looked up to, someone the elders trusted. And yet, something inside him stirred. It began the night of the Harvest Festival. The community center was packed with neighbors. Mason ran the cider booth. April had her art displayed. Keanu helped set up chairs and string lights. As he stepped back to admire the room, Cassie came up beside him. "You know," she said, "none of this would have happened without you." He shook his head. "I just showed up. Sometimes," she said softly, "showing up is the bravest thing anyone can do." He smiled. Later that evening, as music played and people danced, Keanu sat on a bench outside. The air was cool, crisp. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, Lena was there, holding a small package. "We made this for you," she said. He opened the box slowly. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign. It read, "Hale bench, for the man who reminded us what kindness looks like." Beneath it, in smaller letters, "You gave more than you took." Keanu looked up, his eyes full. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered. "We know," she replied, "but we wanted to." The next morning, the bench was installed at the edge of the park, overlooking the lake. Quiet, simple, peaceful. Every now and then, a child would sit on it with a sketchpad. An old couple would rest there during a walk. Mason would read there, back straight, eyes focused, and sometimes Keanu would sit alone, watching the water. Thinking, feeling. He had spent years running from his name, but here, in this town, he found something more important. Not a new identity. But a true one. He hadn't needed to be famous to matter. He just needed to care, and he did. When winter came, the bench was dusted with snow. Keanu sat on it with a warm coat, a scarf April had wear upon, and a book tucked under his arm. He watched as Mason helped clear sidewalks, as April guided a younger child through a drawing, as Lena handed out warm bread from the bakery. He smiled, because everything was okay now. And in his heart, he knew something most people never do, that peace doesn't come from being seen by millions. It comes from being known by a few, from loving deeply and being loved in return. As the sun set, he stood and touched the sign once more, then walked home. Not as a celebrity. Not as a ghost from another life. But as a neighbor. A friend, a man who had finally come home.